Welcome to the True Sports Physical Therapy Podcast. Really excited to have Mike Burton here.
Thank you, Yoni, for having me on. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys for taking a listen. Yes, like Yoni said, my name is Michael Burton, currently the fullback for the Kansas City Chiefs. I attended Rutgers University, where I played football there. I entered the NFL in 2015, where I was a fifth-round draft pick. I spent 2 years with the Detroit Lions, 2 with the Chicago Bears, 1 with the Washington Commanders, 1 with the New Orleans Saints. Now in my second year with the Kansas City Chiefs.
That's a hell of a history. Tell us the important stuff, like the way you got into Rutgers. What took you to Rutgers?
Oddly enough, it was lacrosse that took me to Rutgers, where I was offered a scholarship, where I turned it down.
What kind of scholarship?
Full ride.
Okay.
Where I turned it down to play football. Football was always my passion. It's something I wanted to do for as long as I can remember. I had a few scholarships coming out of high school. No Division I, but I knew that I wanted to play at the highest level, which in my mind was Division I. Not to knock any of the smaller schools, but I just wanted that challenge of playing at that level, and ended up having an opportunity to walk on at Rutgers, and very thankful that I did that.
That's crazy to hear. Don't belittle that. You and I talk about this all the time. For this audience, it's amazing to hear. You were accepted, full ride, obviously, to play lacrosse at Rutgers, but you followed your passion and took a massive risk to follow that passion. So a walk-on at Rutgers, 5 years later, you're drafted. You're going into year 8. You're in year 8.
Yes.
You're on your bye week. Thanks for joining us on your bye week.
Absolutely.
That's insane. What allowed you to be that successful while following your passion?
I think really what allowed me to follow my passion was the support from my family, my parents, to be able to turn down a full ride, right? To turn down a free education, to tell my parents, hey, for the first semester or 2, it might have to come out of pocket before I earn that scholarship, which I ended up doing in 2012, my sophomore year. So, it really just came down to them giving me that green light and believing in me, right?
And you believing in yourself.
And believing myself. But for me, I've always been, what's motivated me is fighting for the people that believe in me, and not so much those doubters and naysayers that say I can't do it. I'm much more motivated by those close to me that say, hey, you could do this. I believe in you, and proving them right as opposed to proving doubters wrong.
Love it. That's certainly a unique take. I always try to pull this back into our sports PTs that are listening, which is so often you come out of graduate school with your doctorate of PT, and you take the path of least resistance. You take your highest paying salary job, and sometimes it's a matter of taking a leap, believing in yourself, or really just following your passion to get into the sports world. And so remember, you're talking to a big audience of people who have taken that leap. I think the crossover is really clear, that it's like this in every profession. I say this a lot while I've been doing this podcast. It's like to hear a pro athlete take those leaps, what can we learn from that and take into our daily? That's one of the reasons I'm so excited to have you on, is because what a crazy leap that was for you to kind of walk away from that.
Yeah, I think it was one of those situations where I just had a bigger picture. I thought going to Rutgers, being in that type of program with former NFL coaches on staff, talking with a lot of former NFL players, current NFL players at the time when I was on there in visits, I'm like, hey, I want to go to the NFL. I want to play in the NFL. Well, I got coaches on staff that have coached in the NFL. I'm talking to players right now who went to Rutgers who are in the NFL. And not that you can't go to the NFL from other schools. Obviously you can. But when I was visiting there and going to their camps and just had this vibe that, hey, this seems like this is my best chance. So it might be a situation where I'm taking a few steps back and leaving money on the table, but it's to take 5, 6, 7 steps forward into the future, and just having that big picture, I think was really important.
Into season 8. Okay. That's awesome. So obviously the comparison, it's a little bit loose, but there's certainly something that we can learn from that risk you took. I'm always trying to pull it back to sports PT. So that's certainly worthwhile. Now, what I wanted to get in with you today is, with the high level athletes that I've been working with, the professional athletes, it's always so interesting to me to hear the levels of care that you guys get and the structure around the way you train and the way you work in the weight room and trying to use the weight room to better the product on the field. I was really shocked when I first got into working with high level athletes, because I was always of the opinion from the outside looking in that you guys are getting cutting edge stuff. And then as I started to work with athletes long before I met you, I started to realize it's not always there. And a lot of that is because there's so many athletes in this weight room. There's so many athletes in the training room. How do you provide these high levels of care at scale to all of these athletes that are in there, especially, preseason, when you have a roster of 90 before you start making cuts? I think that's even higher now. How do you staff that? How do you staff that appropriately? So what I wanted to do with you, Mike, was tell you how I would structure a professional sports organization, not necessarily NFL, but we can talk a little bit specifically NFL. And I just wanted your take, because you're a guy who knows strength and conditioning. You're a guy who knows rehabilitation and prehabilitation. What's realistic? What's a benefit? Hey, you could totally tell me, dude, we do all this. So nice try. Or you could say it's not even realistic, or whatever. So here's the way I would structure. You ready?
Yes.
I want to put, and I always want to do this in my own practice, I want to set people up for success. And so I want to put people working with in their point of expertise. So I want to take the head of sports performance. He's got to be able to speak everyone's language. And this is a guy who's going to run the entire thing. And I'm going to call him, he's the chief of sports performance. Okay. So his background is going to be, he's going to have a doctorate in physical therapy. He's going to be a CSCS. He's going to have experience as a sports scientist, looking at data, aggregating data, making decisions on data. And this guy is your point guy. Let's call him chief of sports performance. You seen anyone that looks like that has a role like that in your vast experience?
So we certainly have individuals who have all those credentials. To see one person who has all those, not sure I've come across that yet, but we definitely have those credentials among different people within the building.
Okay, and I think the guy who's going to coordinate this whole thing should have those. They're definitely out there, especially like as PTs start to get more sports specific. They have an SCS specialization where they're really geared towards sports, and they did a residency in that. Certainly the data is out there. So you have the data analysts and the scientists that are able to put together that data. They're out there. I've met them. That's who I want running the entire point. Then under them, I'm going to have a director of rehabilitation. That's a doctor of physical therapy. He should have some strength background. He should have worked with guys like you, and that's going to be position one. He's going to be in charge of all rehab. Then I'm going to have a separate director of sports science. He's going to be in charge of all your GPS metrics. He's going to be in charge of all your force plates. He's going to coordinate return to sport. He's your sports science. Then I'm going to have a separate director of S&C, strength coach. And then I'm going to have director of athletic training. And that's my hierarchy. Is it possible? Let's start there.
Each team, like I said before, we have those roles. I don't know if we have those 3 or 4 director titles that you had mentioned, but we certainly have those types of people in the building doing those types of jobs. I think one thing that made me think of what you just mentioned was, how hands-on are these directors, right? Like a lot of these, you go to school to get these degrees, you study these tests to get these qualifications, get these credentials, and then are you just sitting behind a desk doing paperwork, right? Like how hands-on, if you have all those different roles, how hands-on can you actually be? And I think that's a question. I know you said those people are out there, but are they willing to not be hands-on with these elite level athletes? Are they willing to just be the note takers and just kind of report upwards, to the superiors rather than like being in the nitty gritty with the athletes? I think that's a question, to ask.
That's a great question.
Because I know for you, you're a huge hands-on.
I love it.
You love it.
And I love treating hands-on, but also I love management, right? I love growing. I love creating ladders for people to climb within my company. I think that's what this is, right? Like if you're director of sports science, you're the top dog as it pertains to sports science. You will be running those data analytics, but you're also going to have a team that you're leading, right? So I see it as a way to, for me, that scratches both itches. That hits, I can get it from both sides in the sense that now I can do both. I can manage just like I do now. Like I can manage, and I love that part of it, but I can also treat a Michael Burton, work with a Michael Burton. So it's the best of both worlds. I think it also builds in a ladder where you can keep great talent. You get these guys coming out of school that are unbelievably prepared. Let's bring them into the fold. You're going to come play for, the true sports Ravens, and in this organization, you're going to be able to grow into a director role. You're going to be able to work. You're going to be able to get increased knowledge. You're going to be around the world's best athletes. So that's the way I look at this like entire hierarchy and performance division of an organization. Come on, give me feedback on that.
Yeah, it's certainly very interesting. I think there are some benefits to it for sure. I wonder though, staff-wise, just how many are these directors?
How many do they need?
What do they have behind?
How many do they need?
Is it 3 or 4? And then you're talking about a staff of you could be doubling, tripling the amount of employees versus what is kind of the norm right now, right? Like how does that work? Like what does that look like type of thing? Not saying it can't be done, but that would be something that is new for sure. And then I guess...
Hold on, let me respond to that because that's a fascinating point in a conversation that I always have. Let's say I added a number of employees. Let's say these employees, I added, for sake of argument, 10 employees to a structure than what is currently existing to fill this whole thing. 10 employees. Let's say they're making 70 to 100 grand. Let's say I just added $1 million, sprinkled across all those to your wages, right? Mike Burton misses a game. What's he costing the franchise?
Me?
Don't answer that. A quarterback misses a game, God forbid. What's he costing the franchise? Yeah. How much is one win worth in the NFL? How much is a win worth in the big leagues? These are worth millions of dollars. By the way, what about the guaranteed money in these contracts? Guy tears a rotator cuff and he's a pitcher and he's done. He's not going to perform at the same level. What did that just cost the Yankees?
I agree with you. Wins at any professional level are massive.
Can a structure,
does this structure, but does more employees lead to a better structure?
Not necessarily.
No. I guess that was my point. My question was, okay, you have these directors, but does that necessarily keep the quarterbacks, the pitchers, the point guards in the
NBA,
point guards in the NBA, your top guys back on the field? I think the communication integration between these two models, I think, is the most important thing. I think that is where you'd see an elevation in a team's performance, is how well can both sides communicate and integrate both the sports science world or the sports med world and then the sports performance world. I think that's a huge factor in this role, right here. And then you have a director. You said you have a director of DPT. Your chief director is also DPT. Is that necessary to have two of those qualifications on staff?
Is it redundant? Yep.
Yeah, redundant. It's just a question.
It's a great question. Yeah, it's a great question. I think the way you look at that is the guy at the top, the guy who's overseeing the whole thing, your chief of sports performance, he has to be able to understand what a PT does. He has to be able to understand what a strength coach does. He has to understand the science. He has to understand what's asked of them. He has to understand their education so he can coordinate. That's the job of the chief.
Is the chief writing the workout plans?
Hell no.
He's not.
No.
He's not writing the rehab plans.
No, he's overseeing it.
He's overseeing it.
Yeah.
So in a sense, he's not writing it, but he's okaying it. So his hands are on it.
Yep.
Okay. So he's just aware. He's not writing it,
He's
but he's
coordinating,
He's
right?
coordinating
He's coordinating. I think you make an awesome point. You're only as good as your level of coordination and communication.
Right. 100%.
And how do you facilitate that? That's true for any business. That's true for any job.
Any job.
So how do you coordinate and how do you facilitate a breaking down of silos? How do you get everyone on the same page, right?
Yeah.
And pull it in the same direction. And that is a huge missing piece of why sports rehab all over the place, but especially at the professional sports level, fails. No one's talking to the other one. I'm not saying it's always like this, but it's a major problem to have these turf wars. And you see it happen in the professional organization. You see it happen on the outside. All the times I get chiropractors that do not work at True Sports questioning what True Sports does. And I'm sure sports rehab guys that work for us are doing the same thing chiros. When those two entities work together, you know who wins? The patient.
Yeah, the athlete.
And the athlete. Exactly. And how do we make this an athlete-focused endeavor? Because that's what leads to wins. I want Mike Burton's shoulder to be working as effectively as possible because it makes sense for the Chiefs to have Michael Burton on the field. That's why they're paying you, so that you can win. That's the idea behind the structure. And listen, that's a culture thing that starts from top down. It's got to be set up appropriately. The right pieces have to be there, but that's why I'm belaboring the point of that's why he has all these backgrounds, so he can speak everyone's language.
Yeah.
You with me?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're spending those extra $700,000 if you're the owner to put together a team like this.
I mean, it's definitely a team full of people who have the credentials, who are qualified.
Yeah.
So again, I think it could be very beneficial. It more so goes back to how are they communicating, how are they integrating, and like what does that look like? Their plan of doing that type of thing.
Right. And so you and I are always talking about sports science and the interplay between PT and strength and sports science. And one of the biggest things that you brought up is, when the hell is this happening, right? Because walk me through a day as a professional fullback with the Chiefs, just in terms of meetings and scheduling and practice times. And what does that look like? What time do you get to the facility?
Yeah, I get to the facility around 6 a.m. usually. And that's kind of when I start my day, watching film, getting in the tubs, workout, lift, that type of stuff. And then breakfast, meetings, right from meetings right to practice, then meetings to walk through to practice, and then back to meetings, and then finish the day with some recovery and stuff like that. So, a lot of time spent in season, the emphasis is going to be on those meetings and the playbook and the plays and the upcoming game plan for the game. Practice, that's kind of where that emphasis takes precedence. Whereas the off season is more geared towards it doesn't take a back seat to say, I don't like to say that, strength and conditioning, sports performance, all that kind of stuff is still very important in season, right? To keep your gains and your speed and your conditioning. But you add in the layer of game planning and preparing for a game in season, it just changes how like your off-season program might look like.
So you're only as successful in as well prepared as you are. You could be as healthy as you want and as strong and as fast as you want, but if you don't have the game plan down, that doesn't help anyone. So the focus obviously is on game planning in season. It's also, you can't execute the game plan if you're not healthy. So that has to come in tandem, and I think that's why you make an awesome point, is there's only so much time. So I lay all this fancy crap out for you, and you're like, dude, there's no time. We don't have time for that. And my counterpoint to that is, how can we get tight and efficient around these things? And so what I'm pushing for is, I want you, part of your 6 a.m. routine, when's lift standardly?
Usually in the morning before practice.
Okay, let's say what time?
It could be, there's different lift groups. You can go early, like before meetings. You can go right before practice. So
okay, and how long are you lifting? How long's your lift?
Hour or so.
An hour. Yeah. Okay, so before you go in to do your lift, I'm going to ask for a little bit less than 90 seconds from Mike Burton. I'm going to have you pop on some force plates. I'm going to have you throw a tendo unit onto a bar. And I'm just going to look at how rapidly you're producing force, how well you're receiving force. It's going to take 90 seconds. Maybe I have you do a couple jumps and bang, now I know what your lift's going to be like based upon that. Doable or not doable?
Yeah, I think the time, those 90 seconds,
90
if it
seconds.
actually took that time.
90 seconds.
Per athlete. So that
How many people in the group?
Typically we'll split up offense and defense. So for argument's sake, I know it's more than 50, but do 25 and 25.
Okay, 25 and 25 walking into the room. That's not a problem at all. I mean, if it takes 90 seconds, you're talking about 25 minutes of actual screening. If we have 3 sets of plates up there.
You have 3 sets of plates. Okay, you have 3
guys are going at once.
3 guys going at once. Yeah, I mean, I think it's doable. It definitely would eat into the time a little bit, but I think it's doable. Now, you're saying based on those scores right then and there,
Yeah.
that will dictate what the program is?
So here we go. You pop on there. I get your scores based upon how well you're performing, and I compare it to kind of where you were. You're this percent, whatever metric we're using. Here's your lift. It's already written out. You're
So
a little bit less. So it's the same lift. You're just going to change
the percentages
exactly
or the numbers.
Exactly.
So everybody's still doing the same lift, but the percentages, numbers, those things are a little bit different based on what those scores were. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely possible logistically. Like if you could make that work in terms of just not like eating into the brunt of the time, and the guys sitting in the back aren't doing anything, and it's not kind of labeled as like wasting time. Like as long as it's efficient, right, and it shows benefits and positives, like guys feel good, like the guys are hitting their numbers type of thing, like all those types of things, then I think it can be beneficial.
Here's what I'm tired, and I think this speaks of what I'm tired of hearing of what's going on is someone wrote out that lift in the back room. Now it's handed to the athlete, and you have a strength coach sitting over there saying, no. Lift says this amount of reps. The athlete's saying, well, I feel like it should be less than that, or I feel like it should be more. There's so much subjectivity in there. We're just past that as a strength and conditioning community. If we can gather the data efficiently, it can't get more efficient than 90 seconds. And you better believe that then that all comes down to, hey, is this helping our guys stay healthy or not?
Yeah.
That's in the data. How many games missed per year?
Yeah. I think at the end of the day,
That's what it's about.
I think in season, a lot of the emphasis in the strength and conditioning world is keeping guys healthy. It's keeping guys on the field. It goes back to your point of keeping your most important players, keeping your highest paid players, keeping them on the field, making sure they're playing, right? So as long as that wasn't something that could promote injury or anything like that, it's something that could be very helpful because that is the emphasis kind of more in season is making sure you're staying healthy, you're able to practice, because a lot of your time, like not only time, but like physical energy is spent on practice. So you don't super want to fatigue yourself in the lifts and stuff like that, because you do have however long of a practice where you're running through plays and you're sprinting, you're changing direction, you're hitting people, you're moving people. So there's a lot of energy and time spent on that. So it really comes down to, like you said, the weight room. How do you make this as efficient as possible? And it sounds like, that could certainly be a play.
Okay. I love it. It's also, you made the point, you were educating me about some of this GPS tracking, right?
Yeah.
And stuff that's already there and already being utilized. It kind of goes along the same point, which is that data is already being collected. How much is it affecting what you're doing on a day-to-day? How much is it affecting what you're doing on a practice field? How much is it affecting with overall workload? That comes back to the communication piece.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a play for GPS and these Zebra stats that teams across the board use. It's just a way to track guys who, especially those skill positions. I mean, you got guys who are just running and running, and you just want to look at their workload to make sure they're not at a point where they might be more likely to sustain a soft tissue injury or something like that. So that information is very usable. It's informative. Teams use it. And it can be very beneficial. So that's just adding another piece. That's what I like to call, that's like on the field stuff, right? So that's testing kind of metrics on the field. Now what you're talking about is just doing it in the weight room. So it's just again, it's combining the two and making them work. And again, it's everyone pulling in the same direction, just helping the athlete.
So when I first met you, when I had to beg you to be my patient, that is what happened. That is what happened.
No.
Okay. How do you see it?
I asked you if you knew of a chiropractor in the area and a massage therapist.
Okay.
You responded with, "Oh, I can do both those things. Very good at manual manipulation, and I can also, I'm very hands-on." So I think that was a way of
and you're like,
saying,
I'm in as long as you give me this t-shirt.
I could, yeah, exactly. As long as you give me the gear, which, by the way, I didn't receive this for about a year later, but it's a great t-shirt.
Okay. So once I tried to make my case that maybe I could work with you, you said I work with a PT already, and that you chose your combine prep based upon their staff, and somehow you figured out that it was important to have a physical therapist involved in that, right?
Yeah.
How do you know that? Because you also hinted at it later when you were like, this PT has to talk to the strength coach and vice versa, and you seem to already have a good grasp on that. So how'd that happen?
Yeah. So when I was preparing for Pro Day and Combine, I had a lot of great mentors who were currently playing in the NFL, a lot of ex-Rutgers guys. And, you know, speaking with them, and you can even look it up, the NFL is a 100% injury rate. It's not so much unfortunately, it's not so much of a matter of if you're going to get hurt, it's almost when. And I don't even like saying that, but that's the sport that you play. So I say all that because the taking care of your body and having a physical therapist and being able to do prehab, being proactive, not always rehab, but doing prehab stuff, I think is something that's just helped with my longevity. So I wanted to start that at a young age. So I went with a sports performance, very similar type of business that you have right now, just in New Jersey, because that's where I lived at the time. Had DPT, worked with us every single day. Strength and conditioning coach worked with us every single day. And I still work with those guys till this day. And I just think it was a perfect mix of the science and the performance kind of coming together and doing these corrective exercises, stuff that I hadn't thought about or didn't think about at the time, that I think I went into the NFL healthier as if I didn't do that process. Because you can come in from a college and be pretty banged up. But I went with a rehab performance-based combine training facility, and I think I ended up going in relatively healthy.
And you've obviously kept that level of health all the way through.
I've kind of tried to stay with what I've learned and tried to kind of master that and be able to do things on my own. Now I live in Maryland now and not New Jersey, so I don't have that hands-on type of care that I used to have, but I was educated. I asked a lot of questions, and when I was there, and I've been able to carry that with me ever since.
How did you find that guy? You just go out and Google that guy?
No, my agent at the time, who I signed with, knew him, and it was a connection that they had, and I interviewed them to train there and walk through their facility and stuff like that. And kind of after the first conversation, I was ready to sign up.
Do you know how the agent knew that outfit?
I don't. He probably had maybe a few players train there in the past and got good work, good word, and good performances and stuff like that. Which I'm sure there's so many people listening to this that want to work with a Mike Burton for many reasons. How do they do that? How does a PT find a Mike Burton or find, what's the name of the agency? Malice? Yeah, Malka Sports.
Malka Sports. So how do they do that?
How do they work with...
How would they get involved with Malka Sports? How do they find Mike Burton? How does a sports PT try to develop this network to work with elite athletes?
Oh, the DM Yoni in an interview and work at True Sports. Well, so that's the best way to do it, because he's working with the best athletes in Maryland right now. You are, right? So I think
that was not a setup.
No, it's not. If you work with a PT, or if you are a physical therapist who wants to work with athletes and get into that world, I think it's looking at physical therapy businesses and companies like yourself that work with athletes, and they put a huge emphasis on sports performance and strength and conditioning.
Right. So what's interesting is...
And just by working there with you or your types of companies, like, you'll come across high-level athletes who have agents and have representation, and then it's a kind of trickle-down effect. You do well by them, you train them. Oh, hey, just so you know, they go back to their agent. Hey, I work with this PT. He's great. He or she is great. Then they got an athlete coming up in college who's getting ready for pro day, for combine training. Hey, just so you know, I represent so-and-so. He's got a PT at True Sports in Maryland. That's excellent. You might want to do some of your rehab there prior to the pro day, prior to the combine, just to make sure you're extra healthy. And then that's kind of how you build out your network.
And you just never know. So I think that's really good advice. Like you never know who's listening, who you're helping that might know someone, that's going to sing your praises. Mm-hmm. Case in point, I really met you by rehabbing the best athlete in the Burton Tignola family, which is, working with your mother-in-law, who's a unbelievable athlete.
Yes.
But I think that really helped in getting Mike Burton to say, okay, fine, like I'll work with.
Yeah, I think
you just never know.
There's always that trust and reference, right? You did really well by Pam, who's my mother-in-law. Is an unbelievable athlete, can do headstands for days. It's crazy. You did really well by her. Obviously trust her. So when she had mentioned, hey, just so you know, I have a physical therapist who's great. You should think about working with him. And I had just moved down here.
You should ask him if he knows a chiropractor.
Yeah, exactly. I had just moved down here and was looking for a place to train and a physical therapist and stuff like that, because that's part of my off-season routine. And it was just fell right into my lap.
Okay, so what's really interesting is having worked with me a little bit, there have been times when I was out of the office and you worked with another PT within True Sports, and you always came back to me with really rave reviews, which is awesome. Educate the people listening. What is it that was great about those PTs that resonated with you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, and I hate giving him so much credit, guys. I really do, but I think you set a standard and expectation of who you're hiring. They have to meet this level, right?
And so what did they do that sat well with you, that made you feel comfortable? Hey, it was a great session. Hey, I'm moving towards my goals for whatever reason you were in for.
Oh, so obviously play football, but this can happen for any sport. When I came in, hey, this is what might be bothering me. This is the sport I play. This is where I need to be at. This is what I need to be able to do in this time period. Let's go. They came up with a plan, and it was very functional. I was doing sports-specific, and at the time, football drills, which I could apply to my actual job, right? And it's one thing to, okay, yeah, I make you feel better, but can you get in this position and make this cut and feel better? Not just, oh, you walk out of here, you're feeling better. No, they put an emphasis. The therapist he's speaking of that I've worked with at True Sports, they put emphasis on, no, okay, you can excel at your sport and feel healthy and feel good doing it, not just, walking out of there and feeling okay. Like, it has to be able to apply to the sport in your job.
So here's the theme that I keep hearing, because the success of those sessions, of the sessions that you had with a therapist, not myself, came from me calling those guys and saying, dude, you're getting Mike Burton. Here's what he does for a living. Here's what we've done so far. Here's what I think is going on. Have fun. Mm-hmm. But it was communication. And
I gotta come. You just took the words out of my mouth. That's what I go back to, the communication. You guys had spoke prior. So you have you and a really good therapist. You're obviously a really good therapist. And you communicate, and what does that create? An amazing situation. But if you didn't communicate that, the first however many session would have been spent, hey, what do you do? How long have you had this? Mm-hmm. What's going on? Mm-hmm. What has Yoni done? Mm-hmm. If you didn't have that, then it would have been delayed effect. It still would have been great, but it would have been delayed. You get what I'm saying? So that communication is huge.
So that communication is really important. Also, the communication, you and I remember, spent sessions where you would spend 45 minutes explaining to me super detailed, here's my warm-up, here's what I do, here's how many skips, here's the way I move backwards, forwards, stuff like that, constantly moving around, but telling me exactly what you did. And I sat there dumbfounded that this is actually someone's routine, because it took you 45 minutes to explain what you do. But I sat there and said, okay, I'm listening, you're communicating to me, and then I'm going to communicate to you. You're already doing X. Here's why we're going to do Y. Here's why. So it's that communication back and forth. By the way, it's the same word you used poignantly when talking about my pipe dream of the way I would lay out a performance wing of an organization. It's communication.
Yeah. And to go back to what you said about how I was explaining to you what I was doing, well, because you need the whole story. How can you effectively do your job to the best of your ability if you don't have the full story? If you don't know exactly what I'm doing? If I don't tell you, hey, these are my main lifts today, the plan could be changed. It could be redundant. You could be having me doing things that aren't getting me prepped for those lifts, or I could end up being more injury prone because we've already done this. Now I'm going to do this on my own. So you need to have the full picture and the full story, I think, in order to do your job most effectively. And I think that goes back again, to me communicating that to you.
And we got to pull it out of you. So that's the advice I give to sports PTs, which is talk to your patient.
Yes.
Right. Get the full story. Do your background. What does a fullback need to do? A fullback's coming in. An ACL's coming in. Maybe they're not an athlete. Maybe they're older, but you got to know about ACLs. So make sure you're ready to roll with ACLs specifically. But am I listening? Am I listening when you're talking? Really gaining that information so that then we can move forward with an outstanding program. This has been insightful. I really appreciate you going through the exercise of talking about just performance, talking about a performance team and the way I would structure it, and indulging me in that, because I think your feedback is super valuable of what's realistic and what does it really boil down to. Without that conversation, I don't know that we get to this obsession with communication and how important that is. But so I appreciate you and your time doing that. I always make it a habit to share my favorite story about the guest that I'm interviewing. And I think my favorite Mike Burton story would be the time when you were really there for me. Do you remember that time? You were really there for me, just as a friend.
Yeah.
You remember that time?
I mean, there's so many times.
So many times
that it's hard to pinpoint just one.
My wife, God bless her, was in a terrible car accident.
Yes.
She was totally fine. And so she called me, and I ran to the scene, and so worried about her well-being. But also, my first phone call. The first phone call I made after receiving that phone call from her was to my friend, the fullback of the Chiefs, Mike Burton, because I knew you would know what my next purchase should be, what my next car. And then the next day when you came in with a beat-up Consumer Reports magazine that you had obviously leafed through 1,000 times. I think there were circles in there.
Oh, yeah.
Because you were the most financially responsible bastard I've ever met in my life. And that sums up Mike Burton.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm number 2 to you, but I'll take it. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for being there for me.
Oh, absolutely. You are
I appreciate
welcome.
it.
Yeah.
Really, another story that stuck out about me, which you really are an example of this. I introduced you to a 14, 15-year vet in the NFL. And the way you talk to that guy with respect, you're an 8-year vet, but the way you talk to that guy with respect and just try to get as much information from him to be as successful, to have the longevity that he's had, trying to make that a part of your career was really eye-opening to me. The fact that you're always trying to learn, you're always trying to gain information in such a positive way is such an awesome piece of you and what you do. And I think that's also just such a great lesson. So that's really the moment that I want to share. You're also so thoughtful about my hair that you're willing to wear a snow hat, so no one knows what's under there.
I couldn't come
it's
on
really
here.
It looks like this under there,
Well,
right? I feel like it does.
I didn't feel comfortable coming on here, letting the flow out.
Thank you.
Here, we need the viewers to be able to look.
Yes. Hopefully they're just listening. Hopefully no one's viewing.
Yeah.
Mike, really, this is the first of many.
Oh, absolutely.
So thank you so much for sharing your time.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. Some great conversation.
And so we're always trying to get better. So if you got feedback for us, share it at pod@truesportspt.com. We're always looking to add to our team and make our team even better. So if you're interested in working at True Sports, shoot over your resume, pod@truesportspt.com. We can't wait to hear from you. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.